Alright guys, so today you're not just going to be listening to me talk to a camera, I have a friend. So I met Shelby at ILHC that one time that I went last year, and over lockdown we've had a chance to connect and chat and hang out and basically just geek out about Black dance history. This is a long time coming. We have both been wanting to do this video for quite a while. We've been chatting about it for ages. We basically just nerded out for like an hour and a bit. And so I've edited down a little bit of our conversation here for you guys on the internets, and I hope you enjoy it. Here it is.
I would like to introduce the wonderful, the fabulous Shelby. Can you tell me about yourself? Who are you? Why are we chatting today?
My name is Shelby Johnson. I'm a dance instructor, DJ from Dallas, Texas. I've been given the historian and activist label in the dance community locally and nationally and internationally, I guess. Here I wanted to collaborate with Katie because I like a lot of her historical stuff, and we're pretty much going to like chat and nerd out.
So one of the things that we found that we have very common ground over is this idea of celebrating different voices and a variety of voices.
My Patreon page, I try to write little small snippets about like historical figures and musicians that we don't really talk about much. People in the scene talk about Frankie a lot, which Frankie's great. He's done a lot to contribute to the dance throughout the original swing movement and like going into the 80s and pretty much building the foundation for the scene that we have. Well, pre-pandemic scene. Like a lot of times I feel like just by highlighting and focusing on him, we kind of accidentally erase the contributions of other people, like Al Mintz, who was teaching in Sweden before Frankie was. And so there's been more of an effort to kind of like value his contributions, and then talking more about Mama Lou Parks and everything, and like in her contributions after Savoy closed, and still training people in Lindy Hop for the Harvest Moon Ball, and also like Norma Miller's contributions, like even after Whitey's Lindy Hoppers and with her jazzmen and her jazz dancers. So kind of going deeper into that, like not just talking about Frankie, but the people around Frankie, because Frankie had proximity to a lot of great jazz dancers and musicians throughout his entire life. Like, especially if you read his autobiography, I talk about how it's a good like starter to go into jazz history.
Can you tell me a bit more about Mama Lou Parks?
Yeah, Mama Lou Parks was, I think, the Savoy closed down like in the mid 1950s, and she was charged by James Buchanan, who was the manager of the Savoy, to keep Lindy Hop alive. So she legitimately pretty much formed a team, Mama Lou Parks and her Parkettes, and they toured for 20 plus years, like performing, doing demonstrations and things like that, doing demonstrations like around the world, not just the United States. They toured in Australia, in Europe and stuff. And like a really cool thing about that, like Ryan Francois talks about it in his podcast interview on The Track, that's how he got exposed to Lindy Hop, was Mama Lou Parks' performance. And so it's how he got exposed and started learning, actually. And she did a lot to kind of work with like inner city youth or kids who came from troubled areas or like troubled backgrounds and things like that, to kind of give them something to kind of give them activity, keep them busy and keep them off the streets and everything. So she did a lot with keeping the dance alive and keeping the Savoy tradition of Lindy Hop alive, by also continuing to train dancers for the Harvest Moon Ball. She's an important figure because a lot of people kind of say when the swing era of jazz ended, Lindy Hop just died, but that kind of totally erases her contribution because she was still touring and stuff throughout like the 60s and the 70s.
I think we can safely say that there's a myth that we have in the Lindy Hop community that Lindy Hop died or Lindy Hop stopped, which is not in fact the case. We are told a narrative that makes for a really nice like underdog story where Lindy Hop came back and there's a resurgence and a revival, and it's a really nice story, but at the end of the day it's not what's factually accurate.
This comes to like talking about like Norma Miller. Like Norma Miller had a group touring throughout the 60s. They were still doing shows. They were doing Lindy Hop at first, but then in an interview she realized it was more cost effective to just have men dancing because they're the most talented of the group. And so to have a smaller group. And so, but they were still keeping the jazz dance tradition alive, like with that. So you had like vernacular jazz moves being displayed in performances. Because of the Stearns who wrote Jazz Dance, they were still having demonstrations, mostly with like Al Mintz and Leon James.
Is that the Playboy clip? It's
yes.
My favorite clip. Okay, for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, like look up Playboy, the Playboy show, Al and Leon.
It's
honestly the strangest and most fabulous weird thing ever.
I think that's a show I honestly would have watched.
Just Hugh Hefner interviewing interesting people, particularly this interview that we're talking about. It's like a 12-minute clip where Marshall Stearns is being interviewed and he's talking about different aspects of the dance. He talks about the Big Apple, a bunch of different aspects of Lindy Hop and social dancing. They're in this weird lounge environment where Marshall Stearns and Hugh Hefner are at the bar, and they pan across this lounge of glamorously very well-dressed people. And all of a sudden there's Alan Leon dancing. And it's honestly a very weird clip, but it has this really lovely historical context because it has Marshall Stearns talking about the dance and then having Alan Leon demonstrating it, which is super cool.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people you've ever taught around the world Charleston has talked about that clip, because I think it's the best example of around the world Charleston that there is.
If you are a dancer in the community, or if you're an instructor in the community, or if you're like one of the, what did you call them, top ladder folks? Like if you're up there, you are somebody who could like be part of this conversation about bringing up other people and like talking about a variety of different awesomeness that was the history of this dance. People seem to struggle with is this idea of like, well then how do I be a better ally? How do I be a better person to like teach this dance or be part of this community as someone who is white passing in my case, or white? Celebrate and honor the voices of people who came before us. Like it's not a difficult thing to like pick up Jazz Dance by Marshall Stearns and then just talk about that in your classes.
One of my Patreon articles is about this, is where I do a short review of all the books that I've read, and Jazz Dance is like, it's good, but it reads like an encyclopedia to me.
Yeah, a little bit.
And that's the downside. The information's freaking great though, and it is dense. One book I've been loving, Jackie Malone, is Stepping on the Blues, where she cites Jazz Dance a lot.
Yeah.
But her writing's a lot more engaging, and it kind of like talks about the Black and African American dance tradition as a living thread. Jackie Malone has a lot of literature that I've enjoyed, but Stepping on the Blues is probably like the most comprehensive. On Bastille Day, on the 14th of this month, I have a long article coming, a long write-up about Josephine Baker. Her Wikipedia page is a beast because people just cited there's so many citations that people used.
Josephine Baker is also one of those people whose life stories sounds unreal. The amount of stuff that she went through and did in her achievements, how she chose to live her life, is insane.
Forrest Gump had to be loosely based off her life.
Right? Like, it's ridiculous how much she accomplished as one human person.
My parents have taught me about different historical figures, and I think I was talking to my dad. I was like, Dad, I didn't realize she spoke at the March on Washington, like, before Martin Luther King. My dad's like, she did? And then I'm like, start talking to me, like, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, this, that, and the other. I spent like an entire day on websites writing this article, and I just talked to my dad and say a few things. He starts listening back the facts of that I was researching.
I am like both equally surprised and very unsurprised that there's no Hollywood biopic about her. Like, I'm surprised because her life is so fascinating, and I'm very unsurprised because she's a Black woman.
Gosh, the erasure of Black women. One of my friends, Margie Bartell, just gave me a list of women. One of my friends just wanted to hear more vocalists outside of Ella Fitzgerald or Billie Holiday. I just did a write-up on Mary Lou Williams, who's completely underrated for her contributions to jazz music. Like, she was an arranger, so arrangers never really get talked about.
Let's talk about some underrated Black women in Lindy Hop and swing jazz history. Like, I want more people to know who Alice Whitman is. You can tell I made a whole video of her picture. Alice Whitman needs some more words.
Yeah.
About her. Jenny Lagon, I also really love.
Yep.
I also really like Mabel Lee. I love Mabel Lee.
Mabel Lee does not get talked about enough. Edith Matthews never gets talked about when talking about swivels, because pretty much that's kind of like, at least in the Savoy, she's kind of credited by Frankie of being like kind of the first person to do it. Jewel McGowan, yes, Jewel has some fabulous swivels. Edith did it first. Mabel Lee didn't see herself as just a dancer. She saw herself as a performer. Like, I know Al Minns in an interview talked about he didn't see himself as a Lindy Hopper. He saw himself as a jazz dancer. And I think that's like Norma, though Norma was super proud of what she accomplished and what she did. She was a jazz dancer.
Yeah.
Through and through. She was a jazz dancer. I think that's something more of a mentality we kind of need to have in the Lindy Hop scene. The jazz dance tradition is massive. And one thing I really enjoy about how Europe has kind of like an aspect of bringing in tap dance alongside with it, which I think in the United States we're starting to do now, these dances came up at the same time. So I think to be able to inform one, you have to kind of know about what's going on with both. The Lindy Hop, which the Lindy Hop scene would kind of go more toward the jazz dance, vernacular jazz dance focus, allow us and give us the permission to explore more things.
Who are some modern voices in the Lindy Hop community you think we should be paying attention to, and how can I find them on the internet?
David Stone has been a big influence of mine. I'm pretty sure he has a website, but his Facebook's public. Latasha Barnes, everyone knows Latasha Barnes. Chester Whitmore, somebody he's literally a walking, talking piece of black history. Like, you ask him a single question, he'll give you 20 answers to 19 questions you never asked, but you're like, should probably write that down. Marie Ndai, she has a perspective of just being a black woman who's lived in Europe, also lived in Canada. D. Daniels Locke and Sarah Deckard are also two people who I think, like D, I just get all types of nuggets from her, like when she decides to speak and everything like that. And I think there's somebody who's kind of like, they've been kind of in the scene, but kind of haven't had much spotlight put on them. Sarah's done a lot of work, like actually with jazz dancers, like studying jazz dancers and like in different clubs and everything. So like the Mabel Leaves, the Josephine Baker, and things like that.
Other things that people can look to if they want to educate themselves, like more broadly, and other places they can go to. Basically, I'm all about diversifying my newsfeed. Some places that are more specific, like you can check out podcasts. Like I really like Code Switch from NPR.
Yeah.
There's We Push Black from Instagram, which is like an Instagram page all about Black history. There's Black Dance History on Instagram as well, which is another Instagram page you can follow. There are loads of ways to listen to people who aren't like you.
Yeah, I say follow with Instagram. Like I follow hashtags, so I follow Black Joy. I follow Black Culture, like, and things like, and those two hashtags. So my feed on Instagram, like I have stuff from friends, but I get a lot of stuff from those. That's a good way to kind of see how Black spaces operate and Black dance spaces operate. Majority of the Lindy Hop community is being a guest in a cultural tradition. As we alluded to like earlier, Lindy Hop and jazz dance is something that died and it was revived. It's like, no, it's a tradition that's still pretty much living, that has been living through this day, like how we talk about with Mamalu Parks and Norma and Alan Leon keeping the tradition alive. With the Transatlantic slave trade started, that started a pattern in U.S. society of constantly trying to erase Black culture.
Yeah.
And so because of that, African Americans have had to always constantly reinvent their culture. And that's where the innovation comes in. Not from an act of being on a cutting edge. I mean, that's an aspect of it, but it's a survival response to the society.
Shelby, you are delightful and wonderful, and I'm so glad you took the time to chat with me today. I want to know more. Where can I find out more about you and your writings? How can I discover the awesomeness that is you and learn more from you?
I tell people a lot of times, like, I am on Facebook. I am quite active on Facebook. So just look me up at Shelby L. Johnson and just follow me. Like if you send a friend request and I don't know you, you're just going to sit in friend request purgatory. So you can just follow my post. All my posts are public, and I post quite frequently about like racial dynamics in America and in the dance scene and things like that. If you go to patreon.com/GetGoodFactory, GITGUD and Factory.
I'll put links in the doobly-doo as well.
And I'm also on Instagram, Lindy Fitness 2014.
Thank you so much for your time, Shelby. You're amazing. Like, would you be up for doing this again sometime?
Oh, totally.
And we can chat about other excellent things that needs to be talked about.
Most definitely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you on the next one of these things.
See you on the next one.
If you enjoyed my conversation with Shelby and want more, subscribe to be notified when my next video with him comes out. If you really liked hanging out with us, check out both of our Patreons and support us through this incredibly annoying time to be a dance teacher. And yeah, you're fabulous, he's fabulous, we're all fabulous. Okay, thanks, bye.